So honestly, this was probably the best Alex Karp / Palantir interviews I have seen in the past year, or maybe even ever.
How do you think about, the Snowflakes of the world, the Databricks of the world, and that product suite, as it were, compared to yours?
Alex Karp just did a whole 55-minute interview with Kevin Warsh. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you do. I think there's a lot of value in dedicating a whole hour into watching this video because they break down a lot of the stuff that you're wondering about Palantir that for the first time Alex Karp actually talks about.
Slings and arrows are interesting. We get attacked data platform financed by the CIA.
So you should watch the whole thing. The link is going to be below in my description, but it's also on Palantir's YouTube channel, which you can access quite easily. Now, I care about very specific things when it comes to Palantir, so I did watch the whole thing, but for me, the philosophical debates of how the world is changing, macroeconomics in that respect, and Palantir's vision, that's interesting to hear about, but I don't think it has a lot of weight for me as far as the valuation of the company. I'm interested in very specific things. And as far as those things, I think that they did cover 3 topics where I think that they had a lot of value for me. So the first topic was basically the competition. For the first time, I heard Alex Karp address the issue of competition, and specifically the interviewer actually named Snowflake. And like, oh my God, for the first time, we're going to hear Alex Karp talk about Snowflake. And of course, he didn't take massive shots at Snowflake, and I think that's going to be just unprofessional of him to do it. However, he did say something very interesting.
So on your commercial business, I'm going to take a shot at your competitors for a minute. Or your would-be competitors. Some of them have a lot of nice products. It strikes me as the non-technologist, their products are narrower than yours, maybe more easily digestible, certainly more easily saleable. How do you think about, the Snowflakes of the world, the Databricks of the world, and that product suite, as it were, compared to yours?
He basically said, well, all of the competition we have right now is not really competing with any of the stuff that we're doing because they're very narrow solutions. We're talking about a platform with 400 different solutions that we can offer. And while they're trying to scale up and offer stuff that are a little bit more than what they can give, we're trying to scale down.
Well, that's both a shot at them and a could be a legitimate, critical, interesting question about Palantir. Our products are deeper than any other products on the market, have an institutional veracity that's differentiated, are doing things that are arguably more important. I don't think that's really subject to debate. I do think what is a legitimate question is if a product is future-oriented and requires a depth of understanding of the product, and or it doesn't inherently map to selling a wrench to a pre-existing technical org, will you capture the full value of those products? So I think you can ask the critical question of various companies. You mentioned 2, there are many. Are the products actually thick enough to be valuable? You could ask the question of Palantir, is it thin enough to be fully monetized? And I think both questions are legitimate. What I would say is our view at Palantir is we're very differentiated in building these products before they exist. On the thick part, we are without competition. So then there's a question of, are we able to supply parts of our product or various products, for example, products that we're building now, products that we have in Foundry, to an enterprise that may in fact prefer something that fits into their architecture that is thinner. That gets into a very legitimate question, which is, okay, forget now. It's like, is Palantir building the product of the future, but willing to supply into the current environment by providing products that are more digestible into an organization that maybe it wants to go their own way and wants to buy a certain product for a certain thing, but does not want to buy all of Foundry. By the way, and so the answer in the near term has been yes. But in the future, we are going to continue to focus very much on what you're calling kind of thick, future-oriented products because they're differentiated. But then as the parts of this product become less differentiated and more, for lack of a better word, commodity, like there's 8 companies that supply them, figuring out ways to decouple the product and sell these things in a modular way, partly because there's an assumption which is just not true that is very intuitive, that if you have a full stack product, that the sums of the product are less valuable than if they were taken apart, i.e. that each part of that product is inferior to a product that's just that product. But it's actually not true at all. It's actually the opposite. And part of what we will be doing over the next couple of years is both continuing to build things that are not understood, sell them to deal with the macro conditions that you have outlined, that I agree, but also democratizing parts of our product so that people who want a different version of the product can also buy it. We're not super ideological there, as long as our core mission is to continue to be entrepreneurial outsiders in the product realm, which is where, again, we would like to continue to stay in a world where we're not competitive.
I mean, our platform is massive and just too thick, in his words. And what we're working on is basically creating a modularized kind of structure when clients can pick and choose whatever they need from Foundry, because Foundry is freaking huge. And I think that was really interesting, because I think in that, for the first time, he alluded to the fact that they're trying to work out a model where smaller businesses can actually access Palantir and Foundry, which has not been possible. Palantir has been known to be a government contractor on the Gotham side, and they've been known to be a Fortune 500 destination for companies. Not a lot of small businesses can afford Foundry, and most of them don't need like 80% of the platform. They need very specific things. So basically, Alex Karp talking about it and how they're trying to create like a modular structure when clients can pick and choose the little things they need is a huge, huge comment, because it actually talks about the fact that in 2 years, Palantir is going to be available as an operating system, as a BI system, whatever you want to call it, for pretty much any business. Anybody can afford Palantir at a certain configuration, whatever it is, the little stuff they need. And I think there's going to be a massive growth engine. I absolutely loved how he actually broke it down. I think that was probably, for me, one of the best pinnacles of the interview. I did also like the second part where Kevin Warsh asked him about employee retention.
At some level, all you are is trying to recruit the best talent on the planet and then build a culture so they can do the most incredible things. And if I've got that right, or somewhat right, tell me about what that's like today in the world versus 4, 5, 6 years.
By the way, it's recruit, retain, and lead without the people feeling like you're a dictator. So there is a leadership part. It's just very different. So to begin to answer your question, the way people think. So like world-class engineers, there's attracting world-class engineers, retaining them, but retaining them while also inspiring them maybe to think differently about how they would build a product. If you build a product for engineers, you have a very interesting product that no one buys, i.e. where buying is a metaphor for worldly impact. So it is the recruitment and retention is a cultural plus, in our case, track record of doing this, which is unique in the world, basically, in my view, and in the view of the people that come. I mean, it's a commonly known fact that Palantir gets among, if not the best software engineers in the world, and we've been doing this for a long time, and we're still getting the very best in the world. So, but then there's that, but there's also, if you want Foundry to be built, or PG to be built, or Apollo to be built, or you want to modulate these products so that you can sell them in different ways, you have a high convincing, it's not conviction, but high convincing culture, meaning you're going to have to convince people that are basically not fireable because they know they're the best in the world. And they also know, unlike most people who evaluate software, that the ability to build a product is maximally unfair in the sense that really only a couple of people in the world can build the kind of products we have. And so you have to convince them, cajole them, get inside their thought process to build a product that's not just the one that they might want to build, but one that will actually disrupt the world.
And Alex Karp really broke it down in a way that I didn't really think about it. And he said, it's not only about retention, Kevin, it's about recruiting, retention, and direction without being a dictator, which I found fascinating, and I could not agree more. He basically talked about the fact that, hey, we got the best talent. And I think in the industry, in the enterprise software industry, in the BI industry, everybody knows that Palantir attracts the best talent. In the industry, it's not only about recruiting the best people, because once you recruit them, you have to retain them, because otherwise they'll leave, if they get a better offer. But even if you recruited them and you manage to retain them, you have to be able to rein them in and to get them to do what you need for the business, and not to get them to work on their own little maniacal side projects that they're interested about that don't have a lot of total addressable market. So you have to be able to also direct these people, and it's not so easy, because we're talking about the top 0.5% of these sort of employees in the industry. And the way you basically achieve that, according to Karp, which I found really fascinating how he explained this, is basically you can achieve all of these three factors: recruit, retain, and direct, without being a dictator, without telling people, well, you're going to do this because I told you so. The way you do it, if you convince them that what they're working on is the next big disruptive piece of software. It's basically, if you do that, they'll come, they'll stay, and they'll do what it takes to make it happen if they're going to be part of that vision. And I think what he alluded to as well here is that that's the part of the stock-based compensation. If you give out a lot of stock-based compensation and you convince these employees that this is the next, best enterprise software, this is a massive disruptor, then you recruit, retain, and direct without really working too hard on being an asshole. And I absolutely loved his answer, and it now makes a lot of sense for me, which it also did before, but now it should make a lot of sense to you why stock-based compensation was such a huge part of what Palantir is doing. Now, at the end of the interview, he took a little shot at Ross Gerber.
Slings and arrows are interesting. We get attacked data platform financed by the CIA. But one of the things I would say is you get the slings and arrows because if the terror attacks had happened, that our software, with the help of people using it, stopped, you would not have the slings and arrows, actually. If the slings and arrows, often because the situation is good enough, you can hate us. And we helped make the situation good enough, you can hate us. And, it's like, maybe that's the price to pay for what many of the things our software does. But it is an interesting thing that many of the slings and arrows are only the result of a situation that's good enough so you can, go try to attack the reason why it was reasonably good.
And he basically, Kevin Warsh asked him about the criticism that they're getting, and he kind of laughed it off. Yes, we're funded by the CIA, hardy har har. Basically, his answer was quite brilliant. He basically said, well, the only reason people like Ross Gerber, he didn't name him specifically, right? But the only people that people are allowed to criticize us and tell us, oh, you're like the CIA-funded company, is because we help Western governments to allow you the freedoms to criticize us. If it didn't help Western governments to allow you the freedom to criticize us, then you couldn't. Just look at what's going on in China. Why don't you try to criticize the CCP while you live in China? See what happens. And I think that's the best answer. Right now, you can criticize all you want the US. There's no other place on earth you want to live in as far as freedom of speech. And go to China and try to exercise your freedom of speech. See what happens. Go to Russia and try to exercise your freedom of speech. See what happens. So this is all bullshit fluff by a bunch of people who don't understand what Palantir is and what it isn't. And they can keep barking and yapping about how Palantir is funded by the CIA, which is complete nonsense, by the way. And it's their prerogative, no problem at all. I think you should watch the full interview. I think it was brilliant. And kudos to Kevin Warsh. I think he did a phenomenal work. I just want to give you my own highlights. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much. As always, don't click nothing, don't smash nothing, don't buy nothing. We ain't got nothing to sell. Thank you for the channel members and the Patreons. You guys have been amazing. If you want to join our Patreon and support this channel and take part of our extracurricular activities, the link is going to be below. It's $5 per month. If you can support us, that's going to be great. If not, the content is still free. See you tomorrow.